Please welcome David to S4 Stage 2.
So just to start, this is a follow-on to my colleague's presentation he gave last year, Daniel Clark. So if you go on YouTube and you search for S4 Modbus Secure, it's about a 45-minute presentation, and it's really good, covers a lot of technical detail I'm not going to have time to get into. So we'll start with, I guess, from the beginning. Modbus is almost 40 years old, it's 39 years now, 1979, and in 1996 we pushed it on to Ethernet and kind of continued down the road where we are now. It was a point-to-point situation before, and as that, we didn't care about man in the middle. Everything was trusted on the network, so there was no authentication or authorization, and we ended up with thousands, probably millions of nodes with this stuff. So we got to move forward. We now need to mitigate replay attacks. We need to protect against people in the middle. We need to provide authentication for rogue users, and we need to still talk to these millions and millions of nodes. So how do we go forward? We're going to wrap it in TLS, just to start. And TLS, if you don't know, is an encapsulation protocol. It allows you to wrap any TCP protocol inside of it. It creates a secure channel. It gives you lots and lots of functionality. So the first thing that we can do is now we can authenticate endpoints. We can decide if we trust that endpoint before any requests are sent or received. On top of that, now we can check to make sure that those requests haven't been manipulated, or if there's a lossy network, not been interfered with just by bits flipping. Continuing on with that, we have cryptographic flexibility. So now, if you do have your low-power system, you can still run in integrity mode only. But if you're going long haul and you need to protect your data, you can encrypt it for confidentiality. Continuing on with that, lastly, nothing's free. It's a heavy handshake. It takes time. It takes a lot of compute power to set up systems, to set up your secure communication channel. So there are techniques to reduce this, and we're leveraging that. So we're making assumptions that people will use secure resumption to reduce the time it takes to set up the connection. A little bit about the authentication. So we're using secure X509 certificates to prove identity. Signed by a certificate authority is the recommended way, but self-signed certificates could be used. We don't recommend that at all. Embedded in the embedded in the certificate is a OID that we're calling a role. So IEC 62351 has a similar mechanism, and we're kind of following along with that. So in this situation, every single piece of equipment in this diagram here has its own certificate. The HMI has a certificate, the PLC has a certificate, the drive has a certificate. In a machine-to-machine situation, they're exchanged. In the HMI, you'll have a certificate that's tied to a user or an operator role, and that'll be exchanged with the PLC as well. All right, school's over. So Daniel came down here last January and presented as well, and said we have a few steps forward. One of which we wanted to do was to prove that the specification at the time was feasible. So after that, we called a few of our colleagues, some other members of modbus.org, and said, hey, let's do an interop event. Here's the specification, go read through it, tell us what you think, and come to our place in a few months, and we'll sit down and try and make this work. So we did. They showed up, we went through the specification, what we liked, what we didn't like, made changes, editorial review, all that fun stuff. And then the fun started where we each brought out our equipment. Turns out we all spent about 2 weeks. We're lazy engineers, so minimal time. And various pieces of hardware. It was really quite interesting. Turns out we all had ARM processors, that's fine, but they range from 133 megahertz all the way up to 1.2 gigahertz, so quite a range of capability there. And there were quite a bit of different crypto libraries as well. So we had a few people to open SSL, we had Mocana, and we had Mbed TLS. Turns out, everything turned on, we started talking, actually pretty quick. So we ran through a whole test suite, and we really ran into situations where we were trying to do the trust chain. We were parsing certificates and trying to make sure that the authentication was there. And that's where we really ran into our biggest issues. So moving on from there, we'll get to that to the next slide. So what we saw with the biggest thing with the resumption was on the slowest machines, it was like 2 seconds, 2.5 seconds to create a connection. On the 1.2 gigahertz, it was quick. But the session resumption time was, we thought, actually quite reasonable. So it really, by an order of magnitude, reduced the connection time. So out of that, we got a few things for values. We have ease of implementation. Everybody took 2 weeks to get it going. And these were their real live, normal Modbus client and server stacks. So they just grafted on TLS on top of it. They were happy that they could use this in a gateway type application, so they could put it in front of their legacy equipment and continue to talk to it, so they don't alienate their customers by telling them they have to rip out all their old stuff and buy new stuff. We decided that there's no reason whatsoever to reuse the old version of TLS. This is where the late to the game is a good thing idea. So we're going to start with TLS 1.2, and we're going to use quality encryption and hashing situation. And lastly, we have to solve this certificate problem. So moving on from that, we have, and I can announce this now, Schneider has started working with Entrust Data Card to create an on-premise CI box to help customers secure their products. It's a software-based solution, and it is going to run, well, spec'd right now for some Schneider hardware, and it allows people to provision certificates into their hardware. We're not doing this with a proprietary protocol. We're going to use SCEP first. We're going to move to EST later, although IOTrust has their own endpoint agent to allow third parties to provision certificates. And we're hoping to get this on sale by the end of Q2, so the first half of this year. So this is a box you can put on your network. It's on your premise. It's provisioned with a private key that you own and allows your equipment on your plant to talk securely to each other. It can do cross-chaining. It can do like hierarchical view as well. And we really, really hope this solves the PKI issue, because not everybody wants to go out to Symantec and buy thousands of certificates that they have to have a live internet connection to verify the authenticity of. So we got the spec. We have some prototype stuff. We have a PKI solution. Where do we go from here? We were supposed to announce the Modbus.org this week, last week. It's tied up right now, so coming soon, hopefully next week. Modbus.org should have the specification, and it should be released soon. The other big thing is last week of March, we're going to have another interop event up in Andover, up at Schneider Electric, and we'd like to see a lot of you guys, other vendors there, with bringing equipment, clients, and servers. Let's do some more interop testing. So if you want, I can give you a card, get in touch, we'll do some logistics, and we'll move forward. That's it. Oh, wait, I got one more. So to wrap up, where are we? We're going to do this. We're going to get Modbus TCP Secure available this year. We want to enable legacy devices to be able to talk more securely to new devices. We want to make it easy for vendors to create products, new products, to be able to sell into their markets, to help their customers solve their security issues. And we want to do that in a stepwise migration, both from the vendors, also to the plant engineers, and to the development teams from the manufacturing companies. So, and that's where we are. Questions?
Can you quickly comment on TLS 1.3?
We're looking at it. That's what we can look at right now. We think that 1.2 has sufficient cipher suites to going forward in the next 5-6 years to handle it. And whether or not the stuff that Adam Crane was talking about the other day, where mandatory encryption and perfect forward secrecy is something that industrial controls needs, we'll look at and we'll go forward there. But 1.2 is where we are right now, and if there is a clarion call to move to 1.3, then I'm sure we'll go that way as well.
This is good because I have a few for you. Let's talk certificate authority for a moment. I did some work a few months back with Global Sign. and got a little bit of insight into how they manage their certificate authority. They're a big deal. The certificate authority is a big deal. Everyone trusts them. Their private key is in a vault. As far as I know, people only enter that vault once a week with, media. There's no connection to the authority machine. The media has been vetted 9 ways to Sunday. The contents of the media have been double-checked by their people and their processes. They sign the certificates. They walk back out of the vault. They lock the vault. Now, you may argue that that degree of paranoia is not justified for a refinery, for a water plant, for anything using Modbus PLCs, but there is a degree of paranoia that is warranted for the certificate authority. If we put it on, into the DMZ and throw it on the Active Directory controller, and someone steals fishes the domain password, all bets are off. It's a very, we think the encryption is buying us something, but in fact you've compromised the authority. How do we teach users how to manage this authority device? Do you issue advice? How does that work?
Same way we taught them to use Ethernet. There's good practices and bad practices. So it's up to our sales and training organization to educate the customers, to keep the CA in a locked environment, to, if you're not actively enrolling devices, you can turn it off and keep it offline. But the biggest thing also is to note that that private key is for that own customer. It has absolutely nothing to do with the vendor. So it really is going to become the responsibility of the customer to keep the CA in a secure physical environment.
Just a quick follow-up to his question. If the CA is taken offline, this new device that you just announced, what's functioning in the role of the RA? That's to say, the one that manages revocation lists and validation.
So if you're just doing CRL distribution, you can put the CA back online to push the CRL, to distribute it off-band or however you will. The CA in this environment, the CA and the RA are linked. You would have to talk to Intrust. I'm not 100% sure on whether or not they have the ability to separate the CA and the RA responsibility, but I'm sure they probably do.
Then revocation checks, by virtue of that, then would not be performed.
Correct.
In
that case, the CA would just be dealing with the status, so OCSP or CRL distribution, but no ability to enroll new products.
I mean, in that same theme, the revocation list, if we have a certificate authority that we're using in the OT space, not just for Modbus, but for other TLS connections that are going to be deployed over time, what this means is that every device that's going to check the revocation list needs TCP connectivity with the revocation list. We're increasing the connectivity of our most sensitive equipment in order to make it more secure. Yet increased connectivity increases attack surface, it makes it less secure. How do we do that trade-off?
So the CRL doesn't have to be pushed directly from the CA every single time. You can do out-of-band distribution of the CRL. It's signed by the same key that's your certificate is signed by, so you could do cryptographic measures to ensure the validity of the CRL. But the CA does not have to be online the whole time. It just needs to create the CRL and push it off to the first level of distribution.
It's not that one brush paints the same color everywhere, but there's different sites, there's different people, there's different individuals. At many sites that we work with, there's a large body of technicians who are charged with keeping this big physical process running. They understand the physical process. They understand how to shut down pieces of it. They understand how to safely take things apart and put them back together, and what's the authorized equipment to put it back. They're very skilled in what they do. They may not know what an IP address is. They certainly don't know what a certificate is. How do you deal with the training issue? How, if there's, you put a new device in and the error that comes up is don't recognize the certificate, oh no. How do you work with that? What does that do to training regimes? What does that do to skill sets?
So like everything else where we do have this IT-OT convergence, we need to borrow from the IT side. We need to leverage their experience. cross-train the IT people into the physical processes and teach them how and where it's safe to make changes in the network. And in the same vein, take the process people. There's new generation coming up that do know the networking, that do know IP addresses, and can translate that into a safe and I guess not abstracted but evolved process in the OT space using IT practices.
I don't have questions, but I would like to add to the CA. And a good practice is you always have a root CA and then having issuing CA. So you can have multi-tier and that would reduce the risk, right? Now, in regard to CRL, I think we should also look into the OCSP, Online Certificate Status Protocol. The problem with CRL is it works.
They get long.
Yes. Every time that your device will have to download the whole list.
Correct.
With
OCSP,
it will just need to download the Delta.
So we would recommend using something, if a device is more capable and it understands
Right.
OCSP, use OCSP stapling.
Yep.
So that on the client hello and the server hello, you get that verification. You can decide whether or not you trust it. So
Okay.
we are recommending that.
Yep. Thank you.
So you get a new plant superintendent, and your CA is sitting there, and the new plant superintendent has to invalidate the root certificate that's in the server. What does that do to the plant operations? How much of a gap are you going to have as all the new things have to be reset to the new certificate that's in there?
I'm not quite sure why you would need to reissue all the certificates for a new supervisor.
You have a new supervisor who puts in a new, I would presume puts in a new private key because he's the new superintendent of the plant. You wouldn't want to keep the same one there because the other one's departed. He's gone on to bigger and better things.
The private key never leaves the CA, so it's not tied to a physical person. And
You wouldn't need to rekey everything, is what you're saying.
It's not a use case that I think I would envision for this personally. So,
Okay.
But an enrollment process shouldn't take that long. We put specifications in to be able to handle over 1,000 enrollments per minute, I believe. So in a plant shutdown, it should be, during a maintenance period, it should be able to rekey and re-enroll all these processes.
But for a continuous process, what do you do?
You can do re-enrollment on the fly.
How long does that take?
I'm not quite certain. So.
Okay.
I have one more I'm determined to reveal my ignorance here. The keys have a lifetime. The private key in the certificate authority, it gets, a new one gets generated. What does that do to the existing certificates? How do you deal with a new key when it arises after, the 2-year or 6 month, whatever timeout?
So in PKI, there's usually an overlap period. There's a period of time where there's 2 CA certificates that you can trust, and they may have, one will cross-sign the other to make sure that you have a chain of custody moving forward. And then once that old certificate ages out, you can only trust the new certificate with the new key as well.
So I don't know much about this, to be totally honest. I'm more of an ICS guy. If you have a distributed architecture where you have remote facilities, do you have to communicate? Do you need constant communications back to wherever the certificate of the server is? Like if you lost comms to your remote site, are you going to potentially have a connectivity problem?
It depends on your schema. If you are trusting that your CA is in a secure facility, you can just trust the timestamp that's on the certificate authority and the cryptographic processes that are used to sign it, although periodically you should check. On the order of, depending on your process, some processes need every single connection. Others may be, if you're just reading a temperature sensor out in the field, that's just reading wind direction. If it's not critical, you may check once a week.
I'll add a last comment and say thank you, because there's been people talking about doing encrypted communications with Modbus devices, with DMP3, with other devices for a long time. And to me, the issue has always been key management. So thank you for your insights here and sharing how to do some of that. Thank you, Todd.